Hey everyone. So in my last video, I spoke a little bit towards the end about a video game idea that I've had rattling around in this brain of mine for a good probably 6 years or so now. And I just really wanted to get it out there, just talk about the idea because to be honest with you, um, it's gotten to the point now with this game idea where I'll turn my Xbox on or I'll turn my PlayStation on or whatever, and I'll think, right, I really want to play a game, but I'm not sure which one. No, actually, I am sure which one. I want to play this idea, but this idea hasn't been made yet, so I can't, and now I'm just stuck in a bit of a rut. I kind of figure that if I talk about this idea that I've got, it might get it out of my brain and into a video, and I can stop thinking about it as much and hopefully enjoy the other games that I've got. I'm going to be looking down here quite a lot because this is where my notes are, so just be aware. Full disclosure on this particular idea, to be honest, it's not a completely original idea. It kind of draws elements from a lot of other games that I really like. If you're tuning in to see a completely new groundbreaking idea for a video game, that's probably not what you're going to get here. So let's begin. I've got my notes here, so I'm going to be referring to these quite a lot because it's a lot to remember. So what type of game is it going to be? Well, I'm a pretty big fan of open world games in which you can either follow a main quest line, or you can concentrate on side quests, or you can just ignore both of those things and go out and explore and look around and do your own thing. It's going to be set in a post-apocalyptic style zombie apocalypse world. I know that a lot of people have the opinion now that the zombie genre is, for want of a better description, kind of dead, but I don't think so. I still enjoy it. I still like things that are set in that world. I think all it needs, for want of a better description, is something that will breathe a little bit more life into it. Missions, main story, zombie apocalypse. The setting for the game, to be honest, I don't really have a particular preference as to where it's set necessarily, but I have come up with some ideas. A state in the United States. So you could set it in California, for example. You've got your big cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, or you could even switch it around and go over to the eastern coast and have it set in New York State. Both of these states have the big city areas, but they also have the suburban areas. They also have the smaller sort of towns or villages even dotted around. They've also got areas of no development really, like just countryside, or perhaps in the case of California, more deserty areas. So taking it out of the United States, we could look at the UK. So I'm looking at one of the larger counties, which I think is Yorkshire. You've got your big cities like Leeds, Sheffield, Bradford. You've also got, again, as I say, areas of open country. You've got smaller towns, you've got villages, things like that. And depending on how the sizing of this works, you could maybe even spread into some of the neighbouring counties as well. So like Greater Manchester, Derbyshire, even Nottinghamshire, my own home county, Lincolnshire, places like that. Other interesting locations, China. Different provinces in China. It's a big area. Lots of different places to explore there. Lots of big cities, like even bigger, really, than I've talked about so far. But smaller rural areas, farming areas, smaller villages, smaller towns. The idea that I'm perhaps more excited about the location setting would be Japan. You've even got different islands, which I think would be really interesting. And the thing about this that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more than the other areas that I've looked at is the fact that it's entirely an island. So you've already got that natural border to it. Fake borders in games are really annoying. Going even bigger than that, potentially, not a new idea for a location, but the game could, as standard, come with all 4 locations. You get to choose which area you go into to start. The one thing that I am fairly precious about for the idea is all the buildings should be accessible. It's kind of important from one respect in regards to looting, which again I'll talk about in a little bit. And when I say all the buildings, I mean a good amount of them at the very least. So you could have some buildings that are maybe decrepit and destroyed that you can't get into. There could be boats in harbours, and even the actual harbours themselves, obviously. You could have boats anchored off the coastline that you could get a little rowboat and go out to them there. And other areas as well, like, obviously airports, malls, electrical plants, water treatment facilities, bunkers, which would be hard to find, obviously, but good to find, Air Force bases, and smaller military camps or bases. The reason I say smaller, I'm going to circle back round to a bit later on. So let's talk about the character that you're going to play in the game. One thing that I really, really like about video games when they do it is the ability to create your own character. I'm talking here about full character customization, so you can basically make whoever you want to make. There will be some what I would call mild RPG elements to it. In RPG games, generally you accrue experience the more you do stuff, complete quests, that kind of thing. When you reach a certain amount of experience, you'll level up. It's not going to go that way with this game, I don't think, because I don't like the idea in this of you being able to level up. You've got all these skill points applied into all the very best skill trees, which is how I tend to play RPG games anyway. What I'm thinking about for this game is that instead of having that, scrapping all that idea, what you'll have is a bunch of sort of core skills: medical skill, crafting, stamina, strength, speech, building, perception, I guess, of the area. And what I mean by that is like how much exploring you do, for example, cooking, IT and hacking, demolition, driving, those kinds of things. Basically, the more you use a certain skill, the more proficient you get at it. So, for example, the more running you do, the better your stamina gets. The faster you can run, the longer that you can run for. The more cooking you do, the better you get at cooking. The more crafting you do, the better you get at crafting, that kind of thing. And those individual skills will have levels themselves, but those levels will only really contribute to what kind of things you can do and how that particular skill benefits you. And what would also be, I think, really nice is if these skills had kind of knock-on effects, like minor knock-on effects to some of the other skills. So the better your stamina gets has a slight benefit towards your strength, for example. So every character would have access to all of these skills from the get-go, but your proficiency in certain skills from the start of the game would depend on your choice of what profession your character was before this big apocalypse. And I figure that I'm looking at maybe 6 different professions. Doctor, who would obviously have a base proficiency in medical, a mechanic who would have a proficiency in crafting, athlete, obviously stamina, public figure, so maybe an actor, maybe a singer, or even a politician, really, who would have that sort of starting skill in speech. Construction, obviously building. Also, I thought it'd be quite nice to have a farmer or a rancher in there. They'd obviously have experience, I'd imagine, with like food preparation, for example, like planting crops, that kind of thing. Also, I imagine as well, hunting and shooting. You need to eat and drink. So starvation will be a thing and dehydration will be a thing. It will be a case of sort of 3 to 4 in-game days for dehydration and maybe sort of 3 weeks or so without food in-game, as I say. Another thing as well is the fact that you can be bitten and infected with the zombie virus. This doesn't necessarily mean or guarantee that you're going to turn into a zombie and that it will be game over. There is a treatment in the world for the virus itself. So if you get to a doctor quick enough, or if you get to someone who has the treatment itself quick enough, you can take it and you'll be fine, and no worries, you won't die. I imagine in game time, the amount of time that you would have to get to that place and take that treatment would be maybe 3 to 6 hours, possibly. But the thing about the treatment itself is that it only works on living patients, so it's not a cure. Also, as well, you'd save by sleeping. So if you reach a camp, or if you set up your own camp, for example, talk about that in a second, you put down a bed, you sleep in it, that saves the game. There will be no checkpoints. There will be no manual saving either. I don't want it to be a case of if you reach a building that you want to loot, you'll quickly save it, go in. If you get overwhelmed, you can just restart again. If that happens to you, you'll then respawn back at the last bed that you came in at the time that you came in at it. So when you loot, you'll lose that. So moving on from the whole character creation side of things, let's have a look at the NPCs, the non-playable characters. So I think the biggest group in this category would actually be the zombies. And one thing that I am quite precious about is the fact that there will be no special or mutated zombies in this, like the tank from Left 4 Dead, or the Juggernaut from State of Decay, or the Witch from Left 4 Dead, or the Boomer from Left 4 Dead, or the Jockey from Left 4 Dead. Don't get me wrong, I feel like I'm focusing on Left 4 Dead a lot here. I love the game, both of them, but I want the zombies in this game to take a much more realistic approach, as weird as that may sound coming from a game that's set in a zombie apocalypse. Obviously, the reason those mutated or special zombies are in those games is to provide the players with more of a challenge. But in this game, I want the challenge to come from the abilities that the zombies would naturally have. So the danger in that comes from the fact that you can easily get caught in a horde. You'll be out looting somewhere or whatever, and you'll make a little bit too much noise, and the next thing you know, you've got 20, 30, 50, hundreds of zombies on you. And that's the key thing really with this, is the fact that, and obviously it's very much dependent on location, so you'll get more zombies in your big cities. In fact, that'll be the higher concentration of zombies right there. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're in one of the areas more sparsely populated regions, not be very many at all. There'd be the occasional wanderer, small groups maybe at most. But on the flip side of that particular coin, you'll get more resources, for example, from the larger, more dangerous areas, and less resources from the smaller, less well-populated areas. And as well as that, the zombies will very much be alerted by sound, obviously. So if you use a gun, for example, any nearby zombies will hear it, they'll start shambling in your direction. If you're in a building and you knock over a table or a paint can or something, even that could do it. Using cars as well is another thing. You get in your car, you fire up the engine, horde hears it, starts coming towards you. If you don't get out of there quick, they're going to swarm you. Even out in the areas that aren't really populated at all, you would, on occasion, very much dependent on how lucky you are as a player, I guess, get the occasional herd that moves through that maybe you've got to hide from or evade in some way, or if the worst comes to the worst, fight your way out of. Another thing that I think is really important when it comes to the realism of the game is the fact that only a headshot will kill a zombie. So another thing that I think is really important when it comes to the actual zombies themselves is the amount of damage that they can inflict to the environment. I've seen a lot of games and played a lot of games where zombies can break through walls and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I don't necessarily want that. Again, realistic. So zombies can break through windows, for example. That's easy. Anyone can do that. Zombies can break through doors. Obviously, they're just wooden. If they're not reinforced, if they're not sufficiently strengthened, zombies can get through it. Zombies cannot break through brick walls. So if you're in a brick walled building or a concrete walled building or whatever, and you've got all your windows fortified, you've got your doors fortified, they'll attack those doors and windows, and eventually they might be able to break through, depending on how well fortified they are, but you're not going to have zombies busting through the walls. Now let's move on from the more corpseified and gross NPCs in this particular game, and let's talk about the human component of the game, the living characters that you'll meet throughout the world. I imagine that there'll be a number of small to large groups, either roaming the world or in small, medium, or large size camps spread throughout the world. And some of these groups will be what you might call good guys, and some of them will be what you might call bad guys. Doesn't really matter too much to begin with to the player, because most of the different communities in this particular world will have a neutral standing with your character right from the get-go. And this will change in time depending on which way you choose to go and who you choose to ally yourself with, and who really you choose to sort of do quests and side quests and stuff like that for. Now let's talk a little bit about the main story of the game. There will be a singular campaign to go through, which will have one end objective, which I imagine will be taking down the game's main antagonistic group, which I kind of imagine would be cool if it was the military of that particular region or area. They have a big military base set up somewhere. I kind of think that their objective will be to control the land around them, to eradicate the zombies, and to squash anyone that opposes them. And how you work towards taking down the bad guys, the antagonists of the game, will depend on which of two main factions you choose to side with early on in the game. And I can only really think of one way to describe these guys, and it's to make a Walking Dead reference. So one of them will be the Rick Grimes group, so the good guys essentially, and the other group will be the Negan group, so the bad guys. So they'll both be working towards the same objective essentially, but they won't be working together. So one group believes very much in completing this objective by having all the weapons, by taking all the resources, by absorbing smaller communities and getting the manpower from them into themselves. And the other is more about developing relationships with other groups so that everyone can work together in that kind of Rick Grimes kind of way that they do. I imagine the actual main quest line for the game will probably take somewhere between 40 to 45 hours. I kind of think that that's a good, not too long length. There will be plentiful side missions out there. Literally anyone that you talk to in the game might give you a quest to do, might give you a mission to do, might ask you to do them a favor, which kind of takes me in a kind of roundabout way, I guess, to the possibility or the option of multiplayer within the game. So I do really like the idea of being able to play a game like this with other people. Sort of early GTA Online style setup for different servers that you could have in this game. Maybe 4 different types of servers for this game, obviously with different servers for each as well. So a solo game would be you by yourself in the world, experiencing the story. You can play the game co-op, so you and a friend or a group of friends come together in the same game to work towards the same goal, and story missions will be available in that respect, but defaulted to the player who has progressed the least, so that you're not sort of jumping people forward too much. So another thing would be a friend or invite only server. So you can invite some people to join your game. You wouldn't necessarily be focusing on the main quest line or the side quests or the optional quests, absolutely. But each character and each player would default to whichever side they chose to join when they got to that stage in the game. And if they haven't gotten to that stage in the game yet, it's up to the other players to try and coax them over to that side. I think that'd be really cool as well. So let's look at the mechanics of the game. So I'd want there to be realistic physics, specifically when it comes to driving. If you crash your car, you've lost that car and it's done. It's gone forever. Also, I'd like to see, if anything really, an improvement on GTA 4's damage mechanics to cars. I remember these times where I was just literally getting in a car and ramming it into other cars and buildings just to see which areas of the car I could crumple in. And I want that in this, because I love that. So let's talk as well about the looting side. So obviously out in the world, there are things that you can pick up. There are things that you can break down to get crafting materials. And you can use them in the upgrade or fortification of different things. So buildings, or you can use them to armor up your cars. All this will depend very much on your skill level at certain things. So another thing I want to talk about is your carry weight. It's something in other games you can be at any one time running around with 15 assault rifles in your backpack or 20 long swords or whatever. I want something more realistic. If you're out there by yourself, you've got a certain amount of carry weight. You can upgrade it if you've got the right skill and the right materials to do so, but not by much. But what you can do as well is you can expand the amount of loot that you can get in any one run by having a vehicle. And there'll be different classes of vehicle in the game. You can get a push bike, which will have the benefit of good maneuverability, bad speed, no extra inventory space because there's nothing on the bike, and no protection from zombies. So if you get attacked when you're on a push bike, you get knocked off. Next step up from that, I imagine, would be a motorbike. So again, good maneuverability, good speed, a slight increase to your inventory space. Again, no protection though. Then moving on up to a small car, which has decent maneuverability, decent speed, and okay inventory upgrade, and some slight protection. A larger car would give you okay maneuverability, decent speed, a good inventory increase, and good protection against bad guys. A van or a truck, bad maneuverability, bad speed, great increase in inventory, and great protection. And then at the very top end, really, when it comes to inventory or protection at the very least, a bus or a lorry, which would have the downside of very bad maneuverability and very bad speed. Okay, so moving on to the next topic. Base building. This is something which I really like the idea of. And what I'd really like, it wouldn't be a Fallout 4 style situation like there are certain areas on the map that you can claim as your own. I'd want it to be that you can claim anywhere on the map as your own within a certain size. And so I was talking before about boats in harbours or boats anchored just off the coast. You could claim those or one of those as a base. You could go to the top of a tall building and claim the top floor or few floors as a base. You could go underground into the sewers or the subways or a subway station as your own base. You could claim a water treatment facility as your own base. You could claim the middle of a bridge or an island as your own base. Everywhere is open to you. One thing that I wouldn't necessarily want is for you to be able to go so far as to build actual walls. You can use existing walls in your fortifications, obviously, and you can reinforce or upgrade those walls. But going so far as to build actual walls just seems a little bit over the top for me. Maybe use other objects instead to block certain areas. If there's a large section that you want walled up or that used to have a wall there and has since been knocked down for whatever reason, maybe you can go out there and find a van or a bus, park that there, and the game will remember that you've parked that there and will keep it there, and it will stay there and act as that area's fortification. And then you can use the upgrading that you can do on vehicles, like applying armor, like covering windows and stuff with metal plating or whatever, to again further fortify that fresh fortification that you've made for that area of your base. My voice is going weird. Have you noticed? It's because I've been talking so much. And that, in a roundabout kind of way, moves me on to the next thing about this game that I'm really quite excited about and really want to see in it, which is destructible environments. And pretty big part of the reason behind why I really like the idea of this, beyond me just liking the idea of destroying things, is the fact that if you set up camp somewhere, if you're insane, basically, and you want to set up camp in a city, again, lots of zombies, so you'll need to fortify it. And one way that you can go about doing that, if you have the appropriate skill, if you have the appropriate materials, essentially, if you've set up in a building here and there's a big roadway next to it and a larger building here, you can take that building down and it'll come down over the road and block the way. I think that'd be awesome. You could take out a bridge leading to an island, set up that island as your own base. Obviously, you'd need a way to traverse the water to get back into the mainland to search for more materials and stuff, but that'd be a pretty effective and safe place to set up as a base. So, they're all the main talking points that I'd thought of about the game. I honestly don't think I've ever talked for so long in my entire life. Believe it or not, this video is currently running at nearly an hour and 50 minutes. So I've got a lot of editing to do. So I'm going to leave it there. What do you think of the idea as I've spelled it out? Do you have any ideas yourself that you want to sort of add into the mix of things that you'd like to see in the game? Or do you have a video game idea that you've wanted to get off your chest yourself for a while? Let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say on that. And like, share, subscribe if you think there's people out there that would like to see this video. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. And as ever, especially now, be good, be kind, be safe, take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time.